My sister stole from my house savings to buy a Mercedes, and my parents told me to stop being selfish because I could always save again. So I went to the bank, filed fraud charges, and got every dollar back. My younger sister by 3 years had that easy beauty that turned heads even as a teenager. I was the awkward one with braces and glasses, constantly trying to fit in. Meanwhile, Claire was the cheering captain with a line of suitors following her through the halls. Our parents, Bernard and Catherine Lauren, never tried to conceal their favoritism. When Claire made the honor roll, there were festivities, gifts, and extravagant dinners. When I came home with straight A's, I would get a brief pat on the back and a dismissive, "That's what we expect from you, Isa." My father, a high school football coach, was drawn to Claire's athleticism and vivacious demeanor. My mother, a real estate salesperson, adored showing off her gorgeous daughter during open houses, saying it helped sell houses faster. Early on, I realized that the only way to garner any attention in our house was to be really responsible, so that is who I became. While Claire partied and dated popular boys, I immersed myself in the school, joined academic clubs, and methodically planned my future. I was not doing it for the praise anymore. I knew it would not come. I was doing it because I understood no one would watch out for me other than myself. During college, the income discrepancy became impossible to overlook. My parents financed Claire's entire tuition at a private institution where she changed majors 3 times before deciding on communications. Me, I attended the state institution on a partial scholarship, working 20 hours per week at the campus bookshop, and took out loans to pay the rest. When I asked my parents why they would not help me in the same way, my father simply replied, "You are smart, Isa. You will be fine, no matter what. Claire needs the extra support." Those words became the central focus of my life. Claire requires it more. I finished with an accounting degree and $28,000 in student loans. Claire graduated with no debt and no employment prospects. So she returned home where my parents had renovated the basement into what they affectionately referred to as her starting apartment. I accepted a job at a mid-sized accounting firm in Boston, rented a tiny studio apartment with a roommate, and devised a rigorous budget that would allow me to repay my loans in 4 years rather than 12. While I was eating ramen and keeping count of every dime, Claire was beginning her unsuccessful business venture, a social media consultancy based primarily on my parents paying her to post images on Instagram. When that inevitably failed, they purchased her a work wardrobe for thousands of dollars and paid for her to go on a luxury vacation to recharge. This pattern lasted for years. Claire would accumulate credit card debt, my folks would bail her out. Her old car was too embarrassing for client meetings, so she required a new one. They co-signed the debt. Meanwhile, I was getting promoted at work, improving my credit score, and ultimately repaying my college loans. 6 years ago, following a substantial promotion, I established a special savings account specifically for my future home. Every month, a portion of my paycheck was automatically transferred to it. I followed interest rates, looked into first-time homebuyer programs, and calculated how long it would take me to save enough for a down payment on a modest property in a decent neighborhood. My lone ally in the family was my grandma Helen. Unlike my parents, she understood and valued my responsibilities. "Your sister may get all the attention now," she told me when we were having tea on Sunday, "but you are building something that will last. Financial independence is the greatest gift you can give yourself." She grew up during the Depression and knew the need of self-reliance. Her words became my mantra whenever I felt the want to spend money on something frivolous. Last year, things appeared to be better in my household. Claire had been working at a marketing firm for nearly a year, her longest period of employment ever. My parents even began to recognize my professional achievements, giving a small dinner when I was promoted to senior financial consultant. For the first time in years, I felt as if we were becoming a regular family, with all members appreciated equally. That newfound ease, that fragile sense of routine, caused me to lower my guard. I began revealing more about my life, including my joy at finally attaining my savings goal for a house. During a family meal 3 months ago, I mentioned that I was close to saving enough for a down payment and had begun looking at properties. "That is wonderful, honey," my mother remarked, appearing to be overjoyed for me. My father raised his glass in salute, and Claire even requested to see some of the places I was contemplating. I showed them images of a modest 3-bedroom home in a peaceful, neighborly neighborhood and explained my plans to gradually restore the old kitchen. They were all encouraging, making recommendations and expressing delight. For once, I felt truly noticed and valued by my family. That moment of intimacy made what followed all the more painful. Last month, I set up an appointment with Monique, a realtor suggested by a co-worker. After years of dreaming, studying, and saving, I was finally ready to make an offer on a home that I had fallen in love with. A beautiful colonial with a small yard and a bay window ideal for reading. The night before our meeting, I decided to check my special savings account one last time to confirm the precise amount available. I recall every detail of that moment. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open and a cup of chamomile tea boiling beside me. The room was quiet save for the soothing hum of my refrigerator. I got into my bank account, went to the savings area and looked at the screen in surprise. Where there should have been $47,613.55, the result of 6 years of discipline and savings, there was only $1,815. My first thought was that I had inadvertently logged into the incorrect account. I logged out and signed back in. Same number. I examined my other accounts, thinking I might have transferred the money and forgotten. Nothing. My pulse began to race and my hands shook as I dialed the bank's customer support number. I need to report unauthorized activity on my account, I informed the person, my voice shaking. Almost $48,000 is missing. The woman placed me on hold as she investigated. Those minutes felt like hours as I paced around my small apartment, panic swelling in my throat. When she returned, her response perplexed me even more. Ms. Lauren, I am showing a withdrawal of $47,600 made 3 days ago at our downtown branch. It appears to be an authorized transaction. The withdrawal slip has your signature on it. That is impossible, I insisted. I have not been to that branch in months, and I certainly did not withdraw that money. After answering security questions and verifying my identity, the representative decided to refer the matter to the fraud department. They agreed to analyze the security footage and get back to me within 72 hours. Meanwhile, I cancelled my appointment with Monique and took the day off from work since I was too stressed to focus. That afternoon, the fraud department called back with news that stunned me. Ms. Lauren, we have reviewed the footage from the branch. The person who made the withdrawal appears to be a young woman who presented your identification and knew all your information, including your mother's maiden name and the verbal password on your account. A horrible understanding came over me. There was only one individual who could fit that description and perhaps have access to my personal information. Can you tell me where the money went? I inquired, already anticipating the response. The funds were withdrawn as a cashier's check made payable to Luxury Motors of Boston. I hung up, my heart thumping, and instantly contacted my sister. No response. I texted her, "Need to talk to you as soon as possible. It is an emergency." She did not respond. I was ready to drive to her apartment when I heard the familiar scream of a luxury car engine outside my building. Looking out the window, I noticed Claire parking a brand new white Mercedes convertible in the visitor's place. She stepped outside, sunglasses perched on her head, as if she had just won the lottery. When I confronted her in the parking lot, she did not offer an apology or explanation. Instead, she grinned widely and remarked, "Is not she gorgeous? I got such a good deal." "Claire," I asked, attempting to keep my voice steady, "did you take money from my savings account?" She shrugged and ran her fingers along the slick hood of the automobile. "I needed it for the down payment. They would not approve me for the full loan amount. That was my house fund," I shouted, my voice rising despite my efforts to remain composed. 6 years of saving. How could you do this? Claire's cavalier demeanor in the face of my distress was almost as stunning as the theft itself. "Oh, do not be so dramatic, Kisa. You can always save more money. You are good at that stuff. I needed this car now for my image. How am I supposed to impress clients in my old Honda you stole from me?" I said, fully realizing what had happened. "You committed fraud. That is a crime." She rolled her eyes. "It is not stealing when it is family. Besides, Mom and Dad said it was okay." These comments struck me like a physical blow. Mom and Dad knew about this. Of course they did. She said, indifferent to my pain. "I needed their help to find your bank information. They agreed you would not mind. You have always been the financially responsible one, right? That is your whole thing." I stood in the parking lot staring at my sister, leaning against a car bought with my dreams, feeling as if the ground had vanished beneath my feet. I drove to my parents' house in a haze, tears flowing down my cheeks as I followed the usual road through the suburbs. The streets I had grown up on now appeared exotic and frightening. How could they have accomplished this? How could they have helped Claire steal something they knew reflected years of my effort and sacrifice? Our family home, a cozy 2-story colonial with blue shutters and a wraparound porch, had always been a source of conflicting emotions for me. Today, as I pulled into the driveway behind my father's Cadillac, I felt like I was headed into an ambush. It was Sunday afternoon, and as expected, both of my parents were home. Mom was in the kitchen preparing their annual Sunday roast, while Dad watched golf in the living room. The familiar aroma of pot roast and rosemary potatoes filled the air, a perfume that had once provided comfort, but now made my stomach turn. "Isa, what a nice surprise," my mother exclaimed as I entered, wiping her hands on her apron. Her smile faded as she noticed my tear-stained face. "Honey, what is wrong?" My father turned down the television and joined us in the kitchen. "You look upset, kiddo. What happened?" Their worry appeared real, and for a brief period, I wondered if Claire had lied about their involvement. Perhaps they did not know. Maybe this was all her fault, and they would be as upset as I was. Claire emptied my house savings account. I added observing their expressions closely. She took nearly $48,000 and bought herself a Mercedes. Their brief exchange of glances verified what they already knew. Furthermore, Claire's lack of shock or fury indicated that she was telling the truth. They had helped her. "Now, Isa," my father said, his voice taking on the placating tone he used when he believed I was exaggerating. "I know you are upset, but try to see the bigger picture here." "The bigger picture?" I asked incredulously. "Dad, she stole from me. She committed fraud. She took 6 years of my savings." My mother went closer and placed a touch on my arm, which I quickly shrugged off. "Sweetie, Claire is going through a really rough time right now. After her breakup with Adrian, she has been struggling with her self-esteem. This car is giving her the confidence boost she desperately needs." I could not believe what I heard. So her confidence is worth more than my dreams, my hard work, my trust. "It is not like that," my father stated, frowning. "Claire needs this car for her career. How is she supposed to meet with high-profile clients driving that old Honda? This is an investment in her future." "And what about my future?" I inquired, my voice breaking. "I was going to buy a house. I had an appointment with a realtor. I have been saving for 6 years." "You have always been good with money, Isa," my mother observed, as if that explained everything. "You can save it again. You have a stable job, no debt." Claire is still finding her way. Finding her way. She is 27 years old. When does she become responsible for herself? My father's expression stiffened. "That is enough, Isabel. Your sister needed help, and we as a family stepped up. You have always been the successful one. Would it kill you to make a sacrifice for once?" The injustice of his comments left me dumbfounded. Make a sacrifice? What did he think I had been doing all my life? The front door opened, and Claire stepped in khakis, dangling from her fingertips. She changed into pricey sunglasses and new clothing that likely cost more than a month's mortgage funds. "Oh, good. You are all here," she remarked, totally unaware of the tension. "Mom, can you help me set up the insurance for the new car?" the dealer said. "I need to do it by tomorrow." I looked at her in bewilderment. "Are you serious right now? You steal my money and then walk in here asking for more help?" Claire rolled her eyes. "God, are you still upset about that? I told you can save it again. You had no right to take my money," I said, eventually losing my cool. "Isabel." "Lower your voice," my mother warned. "The neighbors will hear you. I do not care who hears me. I want my money back, Claire. All of it." "No." Claire chuckled. "Well, that is not going to happen. The car is already registered in my name. Besides, Mom and Dad agree. I needed it more than you need some house. I went to my parents, hoping against hope that they would correct her and take my side for once. Instead, my father slung his arm around Claire's shoulders protectively. "Issa, you are being selfish," he remarked. "Family helps family. Your sister needed this, and you have the means to recover." "Why are you making such a big deal out of it?" "Because it is theft," I exclaimed. "Because it is my money that I worked for. Because you have always favored her, and this time you have gone too far." "That is ridiculous," my mother exclaimed. "We have never played favorites," Claire smirked. "Maybe they just love me more because I am not obsessed with money and material things like you are, Issa. Everyone else seemed to miss the irony of her comment as she stood there clothed in costly clothes, keys to a fancy automobile in hand, all acquired with my stolen money. "I cannot believe this is happening," I murmured, lowering my voice to a whisper. "I cannot believe my own family would do this to me." "Oh, stop being so dramatic," Claire said. "It is just money, just money, just 6 years of sacrifices, just the dream I had been working towards since college, just my trust and faith in my family shattered beyond repair." I saw the three of them standing there, a united front against me as it had always been, and understood there was nothing else to say. I turned and walked out the door, my mother calling after me, telling me that I was overreacting, and that we should talk about it logically. I got in my car and drove away from my childhood home, tears clouding my vision so much that I had to pull over a few blocks away. Sitting in the silence of my automobile, I felt more alone than I had ever been in my life. As I sat in my car, trying to breathe through my emotions, I remembered my grandmother Helen sitting with me on her porch swing when I was 17. Despite having greater experience and qualifications, Claire was chosen for a leadership role in the school newspaper instead of me. "Family is important," Isabel Grandma had remarked, her wrinkled hand resting on mine. "But there comes a point when you have to establish boundaries, even with those you love. Some people will take and take until there is nothing left of you if you let them." At 17, I did not really comprehend what she meant. Now at 29, I am witnessing my life savings evaporate into my sister's new automobile with my parents' permission. This was not an isolated instance. This was a trend that had played out throughout my life. When I was 19, my parents pledged to help with my college fees. 3 months before my semester, they apologized and said that they had used the money to pay for Claire's European backpacking vacation so she could discover herself before college. I took out extra debt. When our grandmother died 4 years ago, she bequeathed Claire and me an equal share of her vintage jewelry collection. By the time the divide occurred, Claire had seized all of the precious pieces, leaving me with costume jewelry and sentimental but worthless objects. My parents had overseen the divide and seen nothing wrong with it. Every time I swallowed my pain and rage, every time I reminded myself that family was more essential than worldly possessions, every time I had forgiven without hearing an apology. This time, though, things were different. This time they had crossed a line that could not be reversed. I traveled to Prospect Hill Park, my favorite site for viewing the Boston skyline. The vista had always soothed me and helped me think clearly. Today, as I watched the sunset behind the city buildings, I felt a resolve stiffen inside me. My phone vibrated with a text from my best friend Sophie. "Are you okay? You missed our coffee date." With everything that had happened, I had entirely forgotten about our regular Sunday evening meetup. I called her immediately. "Isa, what is going on?" Sophie inquired, her voice filled with anxiety. "It is not like you to no-show. Can you meet me at Carlton's coffee shop?" I inquired, my voice still weak. "I need to talk to someone who is not my family right now." 25 minutes later, I was seated across from Sophie in a quiet corner of the coffee shop, telling her the whole tale. Sophie's look changed from amazement to indignation as I described what Claire and my parents had done. "Issa, that is not just wrong, it is illegal," she added as I finished. "Your sister committed fraud. She stole your identity and took your money. My parents helped her," I murmured, still reluctant to accept the reality. Sophie stretched across the table and grabbed my hand. "Listen to me. This is not normal family behavior. This is toxic and abusive. You need to report this to the bank. It is fraud and probably to the police." "They are my family," I answered faintly, the response I had been conditioned to give my entire life. "Family does not steal $48,000 from you," Sophie stated firmly. "And this is not the first time Claire has done something like this." I looked up with amazement. "What do you mean?" Sophie paused, then sighed. "I did not tell you this before because I did not want to come between you and your sister, but 3 years ago, Claire asked me for a loan of $4,800 for what she called a business opportunity. When I said no, she somehow got my credit card information and charged almost $2,800 before I caught it. I reported it as fraud and got my money back, but when I confronted her, she acted like it was no big deal. I looked at Sophie in disbelief. "Why did you not tell me? She swore she would pay me back, said she was desperate and begged me not to tell you. I was angry, but I let it go after the credit card company refunded my money. I should have told you. I am sorry. The news that Claire had taken from others outside the family was the final straw that shattered the emotional dam I had been holding back. I put my head in my hands and sobbed right there in the coffee shop, letting out years of suppressed hurt and rage. Sophie walked to sit beside me, wrapping her arm across my shoulders. It is okay to be angry, Issa. It is okay to stand up for yourself even against your family, especially against your family when they are hurting you like this. As my tears stopped, a strange peace fell over me. Sophie was correct. This was not about the money. Not really. It was about respect, limits, and self-worth, all of which my family had trampled on throughout my existence. I do not think I could ever save that much money again, I answered gently. At least not for years. That house I wanted, it is gone. Maybe not. Sophie responded with a thoughtful gaze. Did you not tell me once that you set up some special security features on that savings account? A memory flickered. When I started the dedicated house savings account, I was concerned about online security. The bank manager had advised adding an extra layer of security, a unique verification code that would be necessary for significant withdrawals, as opposed to my standard banking password. The verification code, I said, a faint hope stirring. Claire could not have known that. She must have somehow bypassed it or lied about having it, Sophie exclaimed. Issa, I think you need to talk to that bank manager again and maybe a lawyer. For the first time since discovering the theft, I felt a glimmer of hope. If Claire had evaded the security procedures, it supported the allegation that this was planned deception, rather than a family misunderstanding, as they were attempting to frame it. I will go to the bank first thing tomorrow, I resolved, squaring my shoulders. Sophie nodded in approval. And I am coming with you. It is time you had someone in your corner for a change. As we exited the coffee shop, I realized I was at a crossroads. One road led to the usual pattern of forgiving without accountability and sacrificing without recognition. Down the other path lay the unknown territory of standing up for myself, which could result in the loss of family relationships. Grandmother Helen's words resonated in my mind. Financial independence is the best gift you can offer yourself. She had been mistaken about one thing, however. The most valuable gift was not financial independence. It took bravery to appreciate oneself enough to expect respect. I chose that course. Monday morning, I stepped into First National Bank, Sophie by my side for moral support. I had called ahead and planned a meeting with Mark, the bank manager, who had assisted me in opening my home savings account 6 years prior. Mark knew me, which was understandable, given how frequently I had come in during the early stages of my savings adventure, excitedly making deposits and talking interest rates. His warm smile faded as I explained what had occurred. Ms. Lauren, I am deeply concerned about what you are describing, he remarked, looking over the transaction data on his computer. This account indeed had our enhanced verification protection, which requires a separate 6-digit code for withdrawals over $12,000. This code is different from your regular banking credentials. My sister could not have known that code, I agreed. I never shared it with anyone. Mark's expression became serious. According to our records, the withdrawal was processed using a verification code, but he paused and typed something. The system shows it was manually overwritten by the teller after multiple failed attempts. What does that mean? Sophie inquired. It means, Mark replied slowly, that whoever made this withdrawal likely claimed to be you, failed to provide the correct verification code, but somehow convinced the teller to process the transaction anyway. Is there a video of this? I inquired. Mark nodded. Yes, all transactions are recorded. Our fraud department should have reviewed this already given the size of the withdrawal. He called the security office and spoke in hushed tones. When he finished talking, he returned to me. They are sending over the footage now, Ms. Lauren. Given what you have told me, I strongly recommend you speak with our legal department. This appears to be a clear case of identity theft and fraud. 25 minutes later, I was seated in a conference room, seeing security footage of my sister at the teller window. Her hair was styled like mine, and she wore spectacles that looked identical to mine. She was plainly trying to be me, displaying my identification and conversing smoothly with the teller. When it came time to provide the verification code, the video showed her looking nervous, repeatedly checking her phone before leaning in to speak quietly to the teller. She is claiming she forgot the code Mark explained. Based on the teller's report, your sister said she needed the money urgently for a medical emergency and provided additional identifying information to prove she was you. What kind of identifying information, I inquired, though I already suspected the answer. Your social security number, mother's maiden name, and the address of your apartment. All information your parents would have had access to. The realization made me physically nauseous, and I asked Mark what my options were. You have several, he said. We can freeze any further activity on all your accounts immediately. You can file a formal fraud claim with the bank, which would trigger an investigation, and I strongly recommend this. You should report this to the police as identity theft. Sophie clasped my hand firmly. You should do all three. If I file a police report, I murmured my sister could face criminal charges. Mark nodded solemnly. Yes, identity theft and bank fraud are serious crimes, but without a police report recovering your money becomes much more difficult, especially since the funds have already been used to purchase a vehicle. I took a deep breath. I will do it, all of it. Sophie drove me to meet with Adrian, a lawyer who specialized in financial fraud claims, after I had frozen my accounts and filed the necessary documentation with the bank. His office was small, but professional, filled with law books and framed diplomas. Based on what you have told me and the bank's initial findings, you have a very strong case, Adrian replied after hearing my account. The bank has a responsibility to ensure proper verification protocols are followed. The fact that the teller overrode the security measures is problematic for them. What about my sister, I inquired, and my parents? Adrian leaned forward, his expression serious. Your sister committed identity theft and bank fraud, both federal offenses. Your parents, if they knowingly assisted her, could be considered accessories. However, proving their involvement might be difficult without explicit evidence. He offered a proposal. Send a formal demand letter to Claire, requiring the return of the full amount within 8 days. If she fails to comply, we will proceed with both civil action to recover the funds and work with the district attorney on potential criminal charges. Before we proceed, Adrian said, I want to make sure you understand what this means. Legal action against family members might have long-term ramifications for relationships. Are you ready for that? I reflected on my parents' disdain of my sentiments, Claire's casual stealing of my dreams, and a lifetime of being the responsible one who was expected to sacrifice without complaining. Yes, I answered confidently. I am prepared. Before filing a police report, I decided to give Claire one final chance, so I texted her that evening. Claire, I have spoken with the bank and a lawyer. What you did is identity theft and fraud. I am giving you one chance to return the entire amount you took from my account. If you do not, I will file a police report and press charges tomorrow. This is not a threat. It is the result of your actions. She responded minutes later. Are you serious? You would send your own sister to jail for money? Good luck with that. Mom and Dad would never allow it. Her dismissive demeanor dispelled any remaining reservations I had. The following morning, I sat in a police station with Officer Miller, a patient woman who meticulously documented every aspect of my case. Unfortunately, we see cases like this more often than you would think, I heard her say. Family financial fraud is surprisingly common and often goes unreported because victims feel guilty about getting family in trouble. I have given her a chance to make this right, I told her. That is more than most would do. Officer Miller told me. We will look into this thoroughly. After filing a police report, Adrian issued the formal demand letter to Claire via certified mail, with copies sent to my parents' addresses as well. I also called the dealership where Claire had acquired the Mercedes and explained the situation to the finance manager. The vehicle was purchased with fraudulently obtained funds, Adrian explained during the three-way call. Your dealership could potentially be implicated if you do not cooperate with recovering those funds. The finance manager, naturally concerned, offered to discuss the problem with their legal team and get back to us soon. Throughout the process, my phone was inundated with messages and calls from my family. Claire's messages ranged from mocking disbelief that I would go this far for money to tearful pleas about how I was destroying her life. My mother's voicemails alternated between guilt trips and threats, while my father's messages were simply angry, accusing me of being selfish and vindictive. After a while, I stopped reading them and handed my phone to Sophie, who sifted out the crucial information from the torrent of familial manipulation. The emotional toll was enormous. Despite knowing I was doing the right thing, years of conditioning had me question myself. Was I overreacting? Was I being selfish? Should I just let it go to keep the peace? Sophie and my co-worker Juliet were my support system, reminding me of the truth when familial gaslighting caused me to question myself. Juliet, who had been through similar family circumstances, connected me to a therapist who specializes in family trauma. What your family did was not just financially abusive, Isabel Dr. Schneider explained during our session. It was the culmination of a lifetime of emotional manipulation and scapegoating. Your reaction is not solely about the money. It is about eventually saying enough with the whole dynamic. 4 days after the certified letters were delivered, the dealership called, and after consulting with their legal department, they decided to fully cooperate with the investigation. They provided documentation proving that Claire used a cashier's check from my bank to make a down payment of $47,600 on the Mercedes, financing the rest. That same day, the bank's fraud investigation decided that required verification standards had not been followed, and they accepted responsibility and agreed to return the full amount to a new account. While the case against Claire was pending, it felt like a ray of sunshine in a very dark tunnel. The bank's decision to restore my funds was a major victory, but it was only the beginning of the consequences of my decision to stand up for myself. Claire was served with legal papers at her workplace, which I had not specified, but that the process server thought was appropriate given her refusal to give her home address. She called me shouting as soon as the server departed, her voice so harsh that I had to keep the phone away from my ear. How could you humiliate me like this in front of my entire office? Everyone saw. I could get fired. You committed fraud, Claire, I said quietly. These are the consequences of your actions. It is family money, she cried. You are being silly. No, I earned and saved my own money, and now you have an opportunity to fix this before it becomes worse. She hung up on me. Minutes later, my mother called. Isabel Catherine Lauren. She started using my full name as she always did when she was angry. I have never been more disappointed in you. Your sister is completely devastated. How could you send someone to her work? Do you know what you have done to this family? I did not choose where they served her. Mom and I understand exactly what I am doing. I am finally sticking up for myself after years of being taken advantage of. That is the most selfish statement I have ever heard. Family helps family. Isabel, your sister made a mistake, but why go to such lengths over money involving attorneys and police? What will they think? I do not care what others think anymore. I care about what is right. My father's call was even worse. Unlike Mum and Claire, he did not yell, but instead spoke in a cold and cutting tone. You have always been jealous of your sister, he remarked, but I never believed you would go so low as to hurt her. If you go through with this, you are no longer welcome in our family. His remarks hurt more than I wanted to acknowledge, but I stood firm. I am sorry you are feeling that way, Dad. I love you, but I will not let anyone steal from me, not even my family. My Aunt Marianne, my mother's sister, called to lecture me on forgiveness and family devotion, while my Uncle Henrik, my father's brother, astonished me with his support. Your parents have always let Claire get away with murder, he grumbled. About time someone held her accountable. The legal pressure, along with the dealership's cooperation, ultimately drove Claire to act. 3 weeks after I filed the police report, she was required to return to the dealership to sign paperwork to return the car, which had to be supervised by a police officer due to the fraud investigation. I was not required to be there, but Adrian suggested that my presence might help ensure everything went as planned. So I waited silently in the dealership's office, while Claire, who looked nothing like the confident woman who had flaunted her new automobile in my face, solemnly signed the forms. She looked up at me once her eyes red with tears. Are you happy now? She inquired. You have damaged everything. This was your choice, Claire, I said quietly. You could have asked for a loan. You could have been honest. Instead, you stole from me. It was not theft, she said, her voice shaking. It was just a misunderstanding. I was going to repay you eventually. With what money, I inquired. You have never held a job for more than a year. You have never saved more than $1,200 at once. How are you going to repay $48,000? She had no response to that. As Claire left with our parents who had come to pick her up, my mother could not resist one more dig. I hope you are satisfied, Isabel. Your sister has nothing because of you. My mother's remarks echoed as I watched them drive away in my father's Cadillac, Claire in the back seat, like a child being picked up from school. Your sister has nothing because of you. No, I thought. Claire has nothing because of her own decisions, and she still has more than most parents who would drop everything to save her, defend her, even when she was clearly wrong, provide her with a place to live, and financially support her without hesitation. What did I have? A restored bank account, certainly, but also a family that might never speak to me again. That notion weighed heavily on me as I drove home alone. Had I made the correct decision? Would the schism in my family ever heal? My phone rang as I arrived at my apartment complex. It was a number I did not recognize, and I answered hesitantly. Isabel. This is Grandma Helen's friend Monique. I hope you do not mind my call. Your granny gave me your number years ago in case of an emergency. Is everything all right? I inquired, immediately alarmed. Yes, dear, but I learned about what was going on through the family grapevine. Helen would have been proud of you. I sat in my car, stunned. She would have... Oh, absolutely. She had similar troubles with her own sister back in the day. Her sister once grabbed their father's savings bonds, which were supposed to be split between them. Helen was the only person who stood up to her. The family was unhappy with her at the time, but years later they all agreed she was correct. My eyes welled up with tears. I did not know that. She never liked to talk about it, but she once told me that standing up to her sister was the most difficult and rewarding thing she had ever done. It transformed their entire relationship for the better. That conversation became a lifeline. During the difficult weeks that followed, my parents continued their freeze-out, refusing to communicate with me via messages or phone calls. Extended family gatherings were unpleasant occasions with people selecting sides and whispering when I entered a room. Claire, confronted with the bank's evidence and the threat of criminal prosecution, eventually signed a settlement agreement to repay the additional costs I had incurred. Legal fees lost interest, and emotional distress compensation Adrian had insisted on including. She would make payments over 6 years secured by a formal judgment that would affect her credit if she defaulted. The hardest moment occurred when I received a message from my mother. We are having Thanksgiving dinner at 4 p.m. and Claire will be there. If you are still insisting on this silly lawsuit, please do not come. We want a calm holiday. Despite the fact that it was the first significant family holiday I had ever missed, the exclusion hurt terribly. Sophie invited me to her family's Thanksgiving celebration instead. My mom already loves you from all my stories, she said, and my brother is dying to meet the badass who stood up to her embezzling sister. I accepted, grateful, but still nursing the sting of being barred from my own family table. 8 months passed, and spring arrived, bringing not only fresh flowers, but also new beginnings in my life. I stood in the kitchen of my new home, which was not the initial property I had planned to buy, but one I had discovered and fallen in love with during my resumed house search. It was smaller than my original dream home, a 2-bedroom bungalow with a little backyard, but it was mine. The bank settlement had restored my full funds, and Claire's restitution payments had left me with enough for the down payment and closing costs. As I unpacked dishes into my cabinets, I mused on how much had changed since that fateful day when I found my money was gone. Claire's most surprising adjustment had been the consequence of her actions, nearly facing criminal charges, losing her job when the news spread around her office, and having to move back in with our parents, which had pushed her to confront her conduct in ways that nothing else had. 3 months after returning the car, she contacted me to ask if we might meet, and I proposed a public spot, still skeptical of her motives. We sat in a coffee shop, an awkward stillness between us until she eventually spoke. I have been taking these money management seminars. She continued, peering into her coffee. It is part of the settlement agreement, but they really help. I had no idea how flawed my financial thinking was. I remained silent, waiting for her to continue. The counselor says I have been using spending as a way to feel better about myself, and that I have been enabled by Mom and Dad my whole life. She looked up at me, possibly for the first time, and admitted that she had been unfair to me. It was not exactly an apology, but it was the most self-awareness I had ever heard from her. I am working in a call center now, she explained. It is not glamorous, but it is consistent. I have a roommate, and I am sticking to a budget for the first time ever. By our second meeting, she had finally made a real apology. I am sorry, Issa. What I did was incorrect, really wrong. I cannot change the past, but I am striving to improve. Our relationship was far from repaired. but it was a beginning. My parents had taken longer to come around, maintaining a united front of disappointment and resentment until Monique intervened. She asked them to lunch without informing them that I would be there and mediated a difficult but essential discussion. "You have always had two different standards for your girls," she frankly reminded them. Helen noticed it. I saw it. Everyone witnessed it. Isabel spent her entire life being punished for being sensible, whilst Claire was rewarded for being careless. My mother began to argue, but Monique stopped her. "Catherine, remember how Bernard's father gave each of you money to start your lives. How would you have felt if Bernard's sister had seized your portion and his parents had told you to earn it back?" That question struck a nerve with my mother, who for the first time truly considered how their behavior appeared to me. My mother sent me a houseplant with a card that simply said, "Congratulations," and we reached a tentative truce by the time I closed on my house. We started with short, awkward phone calls that gradually became more comfortable. "Love, Mom and Dad." My suggestion was family therapy, and to my surprise, they agreed. Our first session was tense, with my father still resistant to the idea that they had favored Claire. By the end of the session, the skilled therapist helped us all see patterns we had not fully acknowledged before. Families often unconsciously assign roles to children, Dr. Weber explained. Isabel became the responsible one, making it easy to take her for granted. Claire became the one who required assistance, which made it simple to justify her behavior. These findings did not immediately erase decades of pain, but they did provide us with language to discuss what had happened and why. On a lovely Saturday in May, while I was arranging my new kitchen, the doorbell rang. When I opened it, I found my parents standing awkwardly on my front porch, my mother holding a casserole dish. "We brought lunch," she added tentatively, "if that is okay." I paused slightly before stepping aside to let them in. "I was just unpacking the kitchen. It is a mess. We can help," my father said, gruff but sincere. As we worked together unpacking boxes, our conversation was guarded but not frigid. They complimented the house, inquired about my new neighborhood, and even acknowledged Claire's minor advancement at work. "She is still going to those financial classes," my mom told me. "She says they are changing how she thinks about everything." "That is good," I said, meaning it. After lunch, as we sat on folding chairs in my half-finished living room, my father cleared his throat. "Issa, I apologize. What we did, what we had been doing for years, was not right." The words I had not expected to hear from him hung in the air between us. "We were wrong," my mother said gently. "We should have backed you as much as Claire. I am sorry. Their apology was not perfect, and it did not erase the pain of a lifetime, but it was a start, a genuine one." 1 month later, I hosted my first dinner party in my new home. Sophie and Juliet, of course, came, as did Claire, who brought a bottle of wine she had actually saved up for. My parents arrived with dessert, and Monique joined us as well, bringing stories about my grandmother that made us all laugh and cry. As I looked around my table at this patchwork of relationships, some old, some new, some healing, some transformed, I realized that I had gained something far more valuable than the money I had recovered: self-esteem and boundaries that for the first time my family was learning to respect. Standing up for myself, as grandmother Helen had done before me, had been both the most difficult and the most rewarding thing I had ever done. Later that evening, after everyone had left, I sat on my new porch swing and looked up at the stars, reflecting on how far I had come, not just in regaining my funds, but also in regaining my voice and self-worth. If you are reading this and battling with family members who take advantage of your compassion or generosity, remember that setting boundaries is not selfish. It is necessary. Sometimes the most difficult people to stand up to are those we care about the most, but strong relationships demand reciprocal respect.